Welcome, everyone. Such a pleasure to have everyone join us this evening for the TIEPAC meeting. It is our pleasure to introduce Dr. Hayley Watson. She is a clinical psychologist specializing in child and adolescents with a PhD in school bullying interventions, along with 4 further academic degrees in the field of mental health. She's been creating and delivering youth and school-based programs globally for the past 15 years and has worked across a range of sectors, including police, victim services, nonprofit organizations, private psychology practices, hospitals, schools, and universities. She's trained educators worldwide on holistic well-being practices for staff and students, and is the founder of Open Parachute. And she's going to be introducing some of the resources that are in Open Parachute and how they are used for teaching practical mental health skills to students and supporting the well-beings of students, teachers, and parents. So it's my pleasure to introduce her and let her take the stage. Thank you so much.
Oh. Unmute. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so grateful to all of you for showing up today. It's so exciting to be able to present what I'm doing in schools and be able to share that with you. So just briefly in terms of my background, so I'm originally from Nelson, BC. Actually, I'm a BC girl, so I was born in Caslow, grew up in Nelson, and then lived in Vancouver for a number of years, went to Simon Fraser, did my first degree in criminology there. And then I went on to study a number of other degrees, most recently my PhD in clinical psychology, focused in school bullying. And always from the beginning, I've always been passionate about working with schools because I really see that so many young people, every young person, deserves to learn how to understand their own mind, how to understand challenges. And to me, if we're not teaching that in schools, what can possibly be more important than that? That skill of self-reflection, that skill of inner knowing, that skill of how do we deal with the things that are hard in life? And so I started, my first school program actually was at David Thompson Secondary, an after-school program 15 years ago. And since then, I've really been working with schools around the globe. And what I've created with Open Parachute is a combination of all of my experiences in schools as well as my work with youth. And the whole aim is to ensure that every child is able to learn these practical mental health skills. So we're not waiting for a crisis to occur. We're not waiting in the therapeutic model that we have now, where we wait until something hard happens, then we introduce skills. And I strongly believe that we need to flip that in the same way that when our children are getting to the age where they're learning to drive, we know living in Canada, there might be snow. So when we prepare young people to drive in the snow, what my mom did, she took me into a parking lot and she started driving in the packed snow and slammed on the brakes and said, hey, what do you do now? What does this feel like? This is what can happen to you. So we need to practice that because we need to be prepared. And I think that analogy is so poignant because what we do with mental health is the opposite. We say, get behind the wheel, go ahead. When you hit the snow, then we'll jump in and say, oh, okay, you probably did something that didn't help there. Now I'll give you some skills. So we really want to be preventative here and proactive. So I'm going to jump into showing you the theory behind Open Parachute, why I've developed the resources the way I have, and why they're so effective in engaging young people in these practices, and how we've designed it in a school setting to try to make it as easy as possible to teach these resources to schools. And then throughout that process, I'll jump in and show you the platform. It's all online and it's video-based, featuring local young people across BC that are the voices of the program. So I'll jump in and show you, but I really want to talk you through why it's developed this way. And then at the end, we'll open it up to some space for some Q&A. So I'm just going to share my screen. And go. Beautiful. Okay, so when we talk about mental health in schools, the conversation usually starts talking about mental health resources. So these are things like tools and strategies to help young people stay calm when they're overwhelmed or distressed. So things like positive thinking strategies, changing our thoughts to something positive, taking a deep breath, soothing skills that really, really help us to cope. But what I strongly believe is that we need to do better than that. We need to get below the coping line. Because the reality is, if we're only learning how to cope in the moment, we never understand why we were distressed in the first place, which means we can't change anything or do anything different in order to help ourselves if we're in a situation that's not okay, or we're having a consistent thought pattern that's brought on by something we've experienced. In order to do that, we have to go a lot deeper. And so the conversation that happens in schools is often a pretty shallow one when it comes to mental health, simply because that is the way our society has developed, and because teachers don't feel that they are mental health experts. So this is where we feel like we have to sit in a school setting. But what we aim to do with Open Parachute is to go a lot deeper than that. And what I see with young people is that we can go so much deeper than that. They are able to engage on a profoundly deep level when we give them the space. So what we found in a school setting is that in order to go to that deeper place of self-reflection where true change can occur, there are 3 critical outcomes that we need to have in place. The first critical outcome is, of course, building resilience in students. But the question we have to be asking ourselves here is, how do we help our students live the learning? So not just telling them information. There's a host of information of all the things that we all know we should do to stay well. But the reality is we don't practice that because we're not embedding that as a tool of how do we do this? How do we embed this? And that's a really key point here. The next outcome here is we have to build confidence in teachers, and this is vital. Most of the teachers that I talk to say things like, I'm not trained as a mental health expert. I don't really know what to say when a student is struggling, so I just don't say anything at all. And that is so common, and it's also so understandable, because the teacher training that we have right now does not prepare teachers to be mental health experts. But what we need to be teaching is the confidence for teachers to know that they can have a therapeutic response even if they're not a therapist. And that is a very important distinction, and one that we need to start teaching on a wide scale in schools, so that every time a student is struggling or upset or distressed, the response can be therapeutic and supportive in nature, rather than an avoidance of the topic because they don't know what to say, or potentially saying something that's dismissive, or saying something that's, not helpful in the context. There are some core skills we can put into place to boost teachers' confidence so that they can do that. And the third outcome is skilled role models. So we know that if we want to teach our children these really important skills, we all know how much kids learn from observation. They watch everyone around them. And so if we're teaching these skills, but we're not practicing them ourselves, we're not going to get the same depth of learning. So we need all of parents, as well as teachers, as well as school administrators. We need to upskill and provide support for every single adult that's around a student, so that they can observe all of us, all of the adults in their life, making choices for their own well-being. Because often what they see now are teachers that are stressed. The school system is very intense and high pressured, and our lives are intense and high pressured. And so it's natural for them to look at that and not realize there's another way. So we need to show them the other way by making sure that every adult is also supported and also provided with skills and tools. And when we do these 3 things well, what we are able to achieve in a school setting, when we're working with inspired educational leaders that care about student well-being, that's the only requisite, just that they care, we can come in, and what we do is we can build courageous independence in students by tackling these 3 key outcomes. And what I mean by that is, when a child or a teenager is struggling, maybe somebody said something cruel at school, maybe a friend was mean to them, maybe something hard happened at home, maybe they're struggling to learn at school. What we can cultivate in them is the courage to acknowledge what they're feeling. And that's a first and huge step, to be able to say, I'm sad about this. I feel lonely. My feelings are hurt. I'm scared. To be able to acknowledge that feeling, and then to have the independence to make a choice, even if it's going to be something that means their peers are going to reject them. So a choice for their own well-being. So I choose not to associate with you if you're going to be mean to that other person. I choose to say no to that thing that everyone else is doing because I know for me that's not the right thing. This takes a huge amount of independence. And we know we can only get there when we first have the courage to recognize what's happening in me. What do I feel in this situation? So that is the goal of what we want to achieve to really create deep well-being outcomes in young people so that they can make independent decisions for themselves based on what's true for them. So all of our resources at Open Parachute are geared around this outcome. So we have a whole model that we've built up that really shows kind of how we address these outcomes and how we do this in a school setting. So I'm going to take you through that now. And as I take you through, I'm going to show you the resources themselves so you can see how this works in action. So our model keeps courageous independence at the core and those three outcomes around the edges. And what we know in terms of making these outcomes come alive in a school setting is that there are three levers that need to be in place. The first one is around building up capacity in skilled role models and in resilient students, and that is reflective learning. So we know that we need to move from a paradigm where we're just learning resources and information to one where we're living them. And to do that, we have to create reflective learning experiences. So we're not just thinking about what's happening outside, we're not just taking in knowledge, we're actually reflecting and contemplating, how does this apply to me? How do I feel about this? How does this relate to experiences that I've been in or that I'm in now? That's the goal here. The second outcome is when we're moving into how does this go in a classroom setting? How do we actually facilitate teachers to deliver this material? And the key here is that the resources have to be relatable. So we have to move from a paradigm where mental health feels like an overwhelming, confusing challenge for teachers to teach and for students to learn to one where it feels easy. And the third lever here is therapeutic responses. So when we're creating this confidence in teachers and when we're building up these skilled role models around young people, we need to move from a paradigm where we as adults are responding from a reactive place to one where we're responding from a nurturing place. And that is a big skill because all of us will naturally have our own response when a child is struggling. We might feel anxious about it. We might feel nervous. We might feel sad. We might feel uncomfortable. It might trigger something in us that reminds us of our own pain. And every teacher will have those reactions. Every parent will have those reactions. Those are really normal. And so we need to be able to teach the skill of how to have a nurturing response even when we're having our own emotional reaction. And when we can teach that to all the adults around young people, everything shifts. And so what's really important in a school setting is that all three of these levers need to be in place. Because if we don't create reflective learning experiences, what happens is there's no real engagement. We're talking about rote learning. We hear things that comes in one ear and out the other. And we all know this. I know this on a personal level also. I mean, I know the millions of things that I should be doing every day to stay well. But unless I've really engaged with it and contemplated it and recognized how important and why it's important for me personally, I don't do it. And that's true for all of us. So we need that reflection. The second piece that's really important is the relatable resources. If we don't have resources that are relatable, and this is something I see happening a lot in schools, there's no structure. Because what happens when a resource isn't relatable is that teachers struggle to deliver it, and often they don't deliver it. And so they're forced to then find their own pieces and their own things. And then we're really relying on each teacher, and which teacher does my child have, and do they have the skills, because some teachers are brilliant at this, and then other teachers don't have that skill set. And that's okay, because that's not a requirement to be a teacher. But the trick is, if we don't have easily accessible, relatable resources, then there's no holistic way we're dealing with mental health in a school setting, and we're leaving it really up to chance of how these teachings are going to come across. And finally, if we don't have therapeutic responses, what happens is there's no support for the learning. So students might be learning all of these wonderful things, but if they're not experiencing therapeutic responses from the adults around them, then they're not guided and supported in terms of actually embedding these practices. So let me take you around the 9 design principles that show really how we do this. How do we create this environment in a school setting? So the first design principle here is when we're talking about reflective learning practices, and that is the principle of youth voices. Now, this is the core of our program and the part that I am the most excited about. So if we want young people to hear, and you know this as parents, if you want kids to hear, they have to be learning from a peer. That is who they listen to. That is who they reference against. That is why social media has caused so much challenge for young people, because they're looking at their peers online and they're seeing images of perfection that aren't real, and that can be really challenging for them. And so the whole core of Open Parachute is that it's built around documentary stories that we create, that I personally interview every young person that's in the program. And these documentary stories are stories of real young people sharing their own experiences. And these are shown in a class setting so that students in class can watch a peer, someone that's their age or a little bit older that they look up to, that they can reference against, and they can hear directly from them how they struggled. So we're normalizing it and how they overcame it. So we're breaking down the teaching points in a really relatable way, and one that's interesting and engaging for students. The second principle here is vulnerable sharing. So one of the scariest statistics in youth mental health is the amount of young people that are struggling that don't reach out for help. I think it's around 80 or 90%. And they can't really track that really, but anyway, that's the statistic that they have. It's pretty terrifying, and I know it in my work as well, and I know it in myself. It's a skill to speak up and tell people that you are struggling. It is a skill that has to be learned. So if we want young people to speak up and tell someone that they're struggling, we need to teach them how to have vulnerable conversations in the first place. So in the Open Parachute resources, because they are hearing from another young person speaking vulnerably as a role model, they are able to go there themselves. And there's a series of exercises and discussion points, partner exercises, journaling activities, and no young person is forced to go beyond anything that they feel comfortable with. So it's all at their own pace, but they get the chance to practice having a vulnerable conversation. And this changes everything for them. The next principle here is uncomfortable truths. And this is a big one, because usually the uncomfortable truths in our culture, we shy away from, especially in a school setting or a public setting. We don't want to bring things up. We want to avoid topics that make us uncomfortable, because we all have that perception that we have to appear like everything's fine. We have to appear like everything's happy and we have it all together. And when we bring up uncomfortable truths, that shows the cracks. But we know that mental health challenges are all about uncomfortable truths. And again, it's a skill we have to teach. So if we want a child to grow up and be able to know how to navigate a challenge, we have to teach them how to face uncomfortable truths, how to acknowledge, yes, this is one of my best friends, but they're actually being really mean to me. That is an uncomfortable truth. Maybe I don't actually want to spend time with them anymore. This activity that I used to think was really good for me, I'm not enjoying anymore. and I'm going to have to tell someone that I don't like it. Uncomfortable truth. You know, I'm in a relationship with someone and I don't really feel that connected to them anymore. And maybe I don't want to spend time with them, or maybe I want things to change. Uncomfortable truth. So we have to start practicing that skill and bringing up uncomfortable topics and leaning into that and practicing. How do we go there? How do we talk about these things? So I'm going to jump out of the model for a second, and I'm going to dive into the platform so I can show you what this looks like. So let me go here. Okay, and let me just make sure, sometimes I want to make sure I'm sharing my audio properly. So I apologize in advance if, oops, there we go. If the video is bouncy, sometimes Zoom has been a little bit delayed. The videos are really slick. It's one of the things, the first pieces of feedback I got from a young person when we first demoed this in schools, actually in Kelowna. They said, love the concept, but get a better camera, Dr. Watson. Young people will be very, very, very honest with you, which is what I love. So our videos are really produced at a level, you know, at a production level of a real documentary. So we're very excited about that, but apologies if it looks jumpy here. So I'm just going to share a little clip of some of the young people that appear in our high school program. Now we have programs from K to 12, all featuring young people that are at the age of the students that we're working with in a classroom setting. But I just want to show you an example of some of the power of these vulnerable youth voices and what that does in a school setting when young people hear that role modeled.
Loneliness is a terrible, terrible affliction to have. And it can really weigh heavy on all aspects of your life.
It felt isolating. It felt really just lonely.
It felt like I was not really living life. It kind of felt like I was a couch potato, taking the back seat on everything, not being enthusiastic.
I think it was just a lot. Like, I didn't like myself because no one seemed to like me.
I felt really guilty and that it was all my fault, because I thought that since I was thinking these things that it defined me as a person.
Once you think about what you're doing, and once you think about what happens, and once you see it happen, and once you feel it happen, it's not a fun feeling, man.
So just a little snapshot of some of these incredible young people across BC that are the role models in this program. And so I want to just dive in. So what happens is they watch one of these stories and they go into depth. What happened in this young person's life? What were their thoughts and feelings? Why was it challenging for them? And then after that, they go through a series of exercises. And so these are all pre-prepared. The teachers don't have to prepare anything. And the idea is that we're guiding them into a real conversation. So they're oriented to, what did they just see in the video? What is the story? What is the challenge? In this particular lesson, they're learning from a wonderful set of young people that have been impacted by messages about the way they look, based on their race, based on their gender, based on their bodies. And so we're wanting to teach that skill. How do we deal with that? And so first, we want to orient them. They're drawn in by the videos. They get to hear what these young people said. And then we're teaching skills. So we're going to that uncomfortable truth of, what do we do when we hear these messages? And the skill we want to teach is critical thinking about it. What are the messages that I've heard about me because of the society that I live in? And then they go through exercises where they're actually talking with their peers about this. So they're practicing that vulnerable sharing of the honesty, of the reality of the world we live in and how it's impacting them. So we're bringing up these topics and they're guided through discussions around them. And what that does, to stop there, what that does is it means they've practiced going to those places that are a little bit uncomfortable. And they've been guided through that. And that means that when they are feeling uncomfortable again in the future, they are so much more likely to speak to you as a parent, to speak to a friend, to speak to a teacher, because they have this template for what that conversation can look like. And it's normal to have that conversation. And even my peers, even the people that I thought were really cool and never struggled, they also are able to have that conversation. So we're changing the whole paradigm with which they see strength and vulnerability. So let me dive back into the model again and show you the next part. So when we're looking at resources being relatable, there's a few key principles here as well. So the first one is adaptive content. So we know that, when I started looking at school programs, there are so many programs out there that are built sort of in a vacuum by an academic somewhere, often a university somewhere, that don't adapt and fit within a school context. So that has been one of our aims from the beginning. So all of our lessons are adaptive in both content and length. So they can be shortened to as short as sort of a 15-minute section, and for the younger kids, even shorter, sort of 10-minute section. And then they can be extended for as long as a class period. So it's really flexible, and teachers can choose how they deliver it, which topic areas they choose based on what's happening in their class, and then where it can fit in the curriculum. And we've also mapped the programs onto the BC curriculum so that they're hitting core curriculum targets, so that's not an extra. It's something that is actually already meant to be delivered in PE, and this is just an easier way to deliver it in a way that goes to a lot more depth. So the second principle here is plug and play, and this is a really important one because most school mental health programs rely on a train the trainer approach, where a teacher is required to go away for some professional development and then come back and be expected to have taken it in and then be able to teach it. And this is where a lot of the programs unfortunately fall down, because that really requires a level of expertise from teachers. And so what we do at Open Parachute is, because the resource is built around these documentary videos, and because all of the lessons are pre-prepared and ready to go, there's no preparation that's required from teachers. Their role is as a facilitator. So they are not delivering the content. They are not the one that is required to say the right thing or say it in the right way. They are simply helping their students as a collective engage with the pre-prepared resources, which means that there's program fidelity. So every young person, every student is going to receive the same learning no matter who their teacher is. And this is a really important point. And I know in talking to parents, that's one of the biggest challenges in sending your child to school. Who is going to be the teacher, and are they going to be able to deliver things effectively? And so we really want to remove the margin of error there for every child. And the third principle here is hot topics. So we know that if we want to be engaging young people in this learning, it can't be boring. Very simply, it has to be interesting for them. So we have to be talking about topic areas that are personally relevant and relatable for young people. And that, of course, changes drastically across the ages. So that's the whole aim with Open Parachute, because we are gearing the whole program and basing it around these stories of young people. We're able to get to the core of what matters to young people. What are they struggling with right now? What are the things that matter as a 10-year-old, as a 6-year-old, as a 15-year-old? And how do you express that challenge? And how do you navigate through that? So we're gearing it all around hot topics. So rather than coming in and saying, now we're going to talk about mental health and teach you how to be mentally healthy, especially as kids get older, teenagers don't really want to have that conversation. But if we come in saying, hey, we are going to talk about social media, we're going to talk about bullying, we're going to talk about addictive patterns, we're going to talk about things that are relevant for you, we're going to talk about boundaries and consent, we're going to talk about things that matter and that are happening in your life right now, and the skills come through that learning, because we're going to hear this really interesting story of a young person that went through something that maybe you can relate to a little bit. And so we start to build up that skill that way. So I'm going to jump back into the platform and show you sort of what this looks like. So this is what the platform looks like. So the teachers are the ones that access the platform. So the students aren't accessing it themselves. So the teacher is always there guiding the process, which is really important. So we have programs across the ages, and then at each age, we're really targeting what are the topic areas that are really relevant and interesting. So things like supporting our peers, that's something that really comes up a lot in the high school ages. Understanding trauma, understanding different ability levels, how to be inclusive when we're talking about different ability levels, addiction, consent, family violence, things that are hot topics that are relevant and pertinent for young people. And then across the ages as well, we have, at the younger ages, things that are a little bit, really targeted around that, being a good friend. Again, starting to talk about addictive patterns with technology at that younger age. How do we communicate? How do we overcome challenges? How do we set boundaries? So again, these topic areas are really geared towards the developmental age and stage. And then all of the resources, so the teacher has access to teacher preparation notes that clearly map where this fits on the curriculum. So it's very easy for them. There's student notes that are all prepared for them. There's a short audio recording that gives them just a little snapshot of this is what the lesson is about. This is how you can reinforce this. So we really equip teachers every step of the way so they don't have to be taking time outside of class, which they're all time poor, of course, to prepare and to figure out how to deliver these resources. It's really made in this foolproof way where they can walk into class and the kids can get a really excellent experience regardless of what the teacher came prepared with. So it's all done for them. And all of the lessons, as I said, are adaptive. So they can spread these topic areas out. There's a lot of different topic areas across each of these lessons, a lot of different sections. So it can really be spread out. And the idea is that this is spread out across the whole year, so that we can really be reinforcing, just like we teach English or we teach math consistently, and we want to make sure we're repeating that. The idea of this program is that we learn it every year and we learn it regularly throughout the entire school year, so that we're really practicing and reinforcing these topic areas. Okay, let me jump back in one last time to the models. And I want to talk now about therapeutic responses. So when we're looking at this, there are 3 key principles that we need to remember when we're talking about building up these therapeutic responses. And the first is psychological coaching. So this is really important in the sense that if we are expected to learn how to have therapeutic responses, that doesn't usually happen naturally. It definitely did not happen naturally for me. I had to learn that. And we learn that by being coached by mental health experts at the highest level. So all of our resources are geared around psychological coaching from clinical psychologists, and we have resources for teachers that clearly go into how to manage risk in classrooms, how to engage students, everything that they could ever want, any question they have is there for them, so they can dive into that. We also have a live chat function on our website so that we can directly speak to teachers that are running the resources and give them feedback, guidance, suggestions if they have any questions about things that are coming up in class. And then we also have parent resources, and this is really important because, of course, you as a parent at home, a lot of the times things happen as kids get older that are confusing, that are overwhelming, and it's so important that you have that support and guidance. And so our resources are built around videos, and I'll jump in and show them to you in a second, videos and exercises that can be done individually or in a group that really guide you through that therapeutic process of diving deep into a topic area. And we also know that, parents have very little time. Your lives are so busy. So we are also developing really short 2-minute audio recordings that accompany each of the topic areas so that you can be sent from the school, this is the topic area that your child is learning. Here's a really quick overview of what's happening, and here's a skill you can reinforce at home. So we're making it really easy, so it's not overwhelming for you. So when you have the time, and if there's an issue that comes up and you want to dive in, you can get all of the information that you would get if you went to see a clinical psychologist right at your fingertips. But at the same time, on a day-to-day basis, you can just tap in and say, okay, they're learning this skill. This is one thing I can do to support them. So that's a really important piece of this program for us. The next key piece here is contemplative pause. And this is something that is very hard to achieve in a school setting. But if we are expecting that teachers are learning how to have a therapeutic response, we have to make sure that they are created with space to stop and reflect on their own reactions and on the reactions of their students. So we have a whole educator well-being course that is designed to teach personal self-reflection in educators. So we're really supporting all of the teachers so that they have the chance to reflect, so that they can become these skilled role models, and so that they also have that time to just stop and pause. And we put those into short 10-minute modules because, again, we know schools are very intense and stressful. And so really the idea is that those can fit easily into a staff meeting, and it's just a way to encourage school leaders to implement in a really easy way a space to encourage self-reflection in all staff. So we're making, again, knowing how we need to make that easy and create that space. And the final principle here is hidden learning. And this is one we've thought a lot about. So if we want every teacher to learn these skills, if we want to live in a world where we know that when our children are at school, every adult that's around them has built up some core skills around how to respond in a therapeutic way, we can't rely on time outside of class to learn those skills. So the learning has to be hidden. And one of the greatest pieces of feedback that we get about our program is teachers who say, I didn't know anything about mental health at all going into this, but I'm a PE teacher, and so I'm required to teach it. And so I jumped into the open parachute program. But I got to the end of it, and now I know how to have a conversation with my students if they're being bullied, or if they're stressed about an exam, or if they're struggling with something, because I've already had the conversation. So this is the beauty, and we all know this, we don't learn by just hearing what we should be doing, we learn by doing. So the whole idea is that because the teachers are facilitators and there's no pressure on them, or not putting this burden for them to be the expert, what happens is that every teacher can be delivering this, and that means every teacher is building up the skill set simply by engaging alongside their students in these conversations. So I'm going to jump back into the platform one last time and just show you these last pieces, and then I will open it up to some Q&A. So let's go back to our dashboard here. So I want to just show you a little bit about the pieces I just mentioned. So we have an entire educator well-being course that's geared around topic areas that are personally relevant and relatable for teachers. Stress, of course, being the number one, is a highly stressful job. And this is all geared around reflection about the things that are happening in the lives of teachers, these things that are potentially challenging. So what we're doing here is we're allowing the space to practice this skill that we want our students to learn. And this is so vital, because the best way to teach this, to teach any of this self-reflection, is if we're doing it themselves. And so for all those teachers that have that feeling of, I don't know how to support a child, I don't know what to say when they're struggling, when they've had these conversations themselves with their peers, all of a sudden it becomes second nature. Because really the response is very simple. It's about validation, it's about support, it's about normalizing, and we know that as soon as we've tried to do it ourselves. So we really want to make this simple for teachers and really support them in this. It's a really important part of it, because it is hard. It is a hard job they're doing, and so we want them to be supported in that. There's also a whole series of professional developments, and then the teaching resources, again, go into specific details around what do I do if a child is upset in class? And we really give them the language. This is something that teachers have told me a lot. What do I actually say? So we break it down for them. This is the language we want to use. Anytime a student is upset or overwhelmed by anything that we're talking about, we simply validate their feelings, we let them know it's okay, and we connect them to someone that they can speak to. And this is really important, because that fear is what blocks us from bringing these topics up in school. We think, I don't want to upset kids, I don't want to trigger something in them, but when we're forgetting that if they're upset by something, that feeling was there already. So by avoiding triggering them, we're actually doing them a huge disservice because we're not allowing it to come to the surface so that they can deal with it. So we need to make sure that teachers feel confident in knowing it's okay if a young person is struggling. It's okay if they're sad. That's really healthy. If they're in a hard situation, we want them to be able to show that they're sad so we can get them support. So again, that's one example of the teaching resources that are available. And then the last thing I want to show you is the parent resources. So there's a whole pack that goes home to you as parents. And what this is, it's a whole series of topic areas, and I'll jump in and show you this as well, what this looks like. So you have all of these topic areas that you can choose from, things that are relevant, that are important, things that kids go through, that are challenges that occur. And it's video-based, so you watch videos, and then again, questions, reflection exercises. What are the things, if I'm building resilience in my child, what do I actually need to pay attention to? What is actually happening for them? So really diving deep into what is resilience? Okay, what does that mean? Okay, it's about feeling like I'm nervous about my feelings. I don't want to connect to my feelings. So we gear you towards, what do you want to start paying attention to? Oh, the reactions. Okay, what are they reacting to? And it's really about creating that space of reflection and questioning. And we're also in the middle, so I'm in the middle of writing a book that accompanies this as well. So we're trying to figure out all the different ways that we can give you as parents information that's easy to digest. And as I said, so there's this whole series of resources. This can also be done as a group, and we find that that's a really beautiful way to do that. So bringing groups of parents together and guiding through, a series, whatever topic area feels relevant, and really going into how do we join together as parents to really dive into this learning and make it a core part of how we're supporting our children and how we're supporting them at school. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there's also the audio recordings that get sent out that are just the really simple, here's the skill, here's how you can reinforce it. Okay, that's a lot of talking from me. So I believe that is the overview, and that is really sort of the core, showing you all of the elements of what we're doing with Open Parachute. And my hope and my aim is to get this program into as many schools across BC as we possibly can. And so we're already working with, I think that we're in 16 districts across BC already, and a few private schools as well, independent schools. And what we're really hoping to do and we're aiming to do is get this as widespread as possible so that every single child across the province, and of course we're global as well, so everywhere else in the world too, but specifically BC is a specific passion of mine, but every child is able to be learning these skills as a part of core curriculum. So it's not an extra, it's not if something's hard, then we'll learn some skills. It's a core part of what we're providing young people with so that they learn every single year how to overcome challenges just the way they learn how to write an essay or how to solve a math problem. Okay, so I'd love to open it up to any questions or comments or thoughts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hayley. That was awesome. I guess we have one question I have is, what can we do sort of as parents to get this type of thing in our school or in our district, or how do we do that?
Amazing question. So the first, there's two big hurdles that I find. One hurdle is getting the school leadership to get excited about it. Now, what I find is if I can present to them, they get excited about it, but it's getting in front of them. So for the most part, when school leadership cares about the well-being of their students, and in BC, I really haven't come across any school leader that doesn't. It's really progressive in that way, which is fantastic. So getting a meeting with school leadership is the first hurdle. So anything that parents can do to help that with the superintendent, ideally. And the second piece is that funding is always an issue. So some districts can afford to put the program in, and a lot of districts feel like they don't have funding. And so we are working with the ministry, and we're hoping, of course we don't have any promises, but we're hoping that there'll be more funding available. But the other real core piece is figuring out what other ways can we do to fund this, because what we've created, as you can see, is a very in-depth program, and the video production is something we never want to cut corners on. We want this to be the best program. We want this to be continually creating new content, and that means it's not a cheap thing. And so when you break down the cost, it's a variety of factors that factor into it, but it's roughly $30 a student per year. So it's not a large cost. When you say that to anyone outside the school system, they say, oh, that's so reasonable. But inside the school system, there's very little funding for this. So any outside sources of funding, so for instance, in Australia, we've partnered with a fantastic foundation that is raising funds from local businesses, from local people, and they are funding the program in schools. And that is a fantastic model. So if parents or PACs or can connect us to any organizations, or if you have fundraising abilities, that would be so ideal, because we do talk to a lot of districts that say, we love this is amazing, and we can really only afford to put it into 2 schools, rather than the 15 that are in our district. And so those are the 2 things that would be so phenomenal to have help with, and we'd be so grateful for that.
Thank you. There's a few other questions popping up in the chat. What question from one parent is, which BC schools or school boards has this program already been rolled out to, which you briefly touched on, but maybe if you...
Absolutely. Good. You're testing my memory, so let me see if I can roll them off the tongue here. So we're just about to be in Vancouver. We haven't signed that across the dotted line, but I think that's going to be finalized today or tomorrow, so don't hold me to that, but I'm hoping Vancouver. North Vancouver, West Vancouver, Coquitlam, and then Haida Gwaii, North Okanagan, Shuswap, a few of the Okanagans, and I always forget the names, but Central Okanagan. We're just now about to start in Kootenay and Nelson, my district, is 8. We've just started in Fort Nelson. I know I'm those are the ones that are popping into my mind, but some of those districts are able to, Mission, Hope, around Hope. And so some of those districts are going out across the whole district. Some of those are just able to start with the pilot. So again, naming those who are in it and it's all sorted, it means that we started and they're interested and it's happening. But those are the if I can send a list if you're really interested in knowing exactly which ones. I can definitely send a list after. But those are the ones that are coming up into mind.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's another question here. Can you share any feedback from teachers or students who have already participated in the program?
Absolutely. So on our website is a whole series of testimonials. So I really encourage you, and maybe there's a link that can be sent out after, to go in, and we can even send, so they're all throughout the website. I can also send a link that just directly links to all of the testimonials. And some of the biggest pieces of feedback. So what students say, the biggest thing that students say, which gets me every time, I didn't realize I wasn't the only one. Because there's that sense of no matter how many times we tell them, no matter how many times we say it's normal to struggle, that registering of, really and truly someone else is thinking the thoughts that I'm thinking. And then the building up of skills. So teachers often are reporting that they see students working through challenges, and that's so important. So the idea of the program is not to boost happiness necessarily, or to boost a short-term state change. It's to build skills. So the key outcomes that we're seeing is that they're able to navigate challenges. And because a lot of the program is built around the challenges that they are most pertinent for them, it's peer dynamics. So they're able to have empathy and understand, okay, I understand when someone's mean to me, it's not my fault. Or when I'm in a friendship challenge, I'm able to work through it. I'm able to sort of overcome that. And then, so the teachers are really seeing that, and the students are seeing that. And really that sense, a lot of the feedback we get from students as well is, some students in the extreme, we have comments of this program saved my life. I was really, really depressed and I had no one to talk to about it. And this was the only thing, this brought it to a head because I was never going to reach out. So it needed to come to me. So that's the sort of extreme. And then on the other end of the spectrum is the fun. It's really fun to be thinking about this stuff, to have a space to talk about this, that which is really exciting for us, because that's the idea, is we want it to be preventative. We want it to be fun. And then teachers also really talking about, how easy it is to use, which is a really important one, saying this is something that they can engage with, they can engage, on a day when they haven't prepared anything, they can run the program, which is vital because it means they're using it. And then building up their capacity. So their understanding and their skills around what do I do to support my students? A lot of the teachers are saying, I always cared and I always sort of tried to say things that were supportive, but now I have confidence and I know what to say. I know, and a lot of the teachers will sort of draw on the material later. So they'll go through the lessons and then something will occur in class and they'll be able to say, we did a lesson on this. Let's go back and watch that video again. And let's figure this out together. What just happened? How does that relate to what you just saw? So it's this sort of living, breathing resource. So those are some of the exciting, highlights that we hear, but I really encourage you to go to our website and take a look, and you can there's very long, in-depth testimonials. So there's sort of 20 minutes at a time, but you can really see in a lot of the places across BC what they're saying about it.
Well, thank you. I know Josh, did you had your hand up for a second there?
That was me. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation a lot. I think this program sounds amazing. A question I had was sort of what resources do you offer, through this program, if you wind up with kids who are reaching out and then big things come up that teachers or maybe even parents aren't really equipped to know how to handle? What resources are you able to sort of offer to guide them to next steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So every school that we work with, we make sure that they have local resources. So because our program is in schools globally, we really want to make sure we're drawing on what's present in that community. So whether that's therapists, whether that's psychologists, whether that's school counselors, whatever is that local connection. And so there's a real distinction in terms of the program isn't meant to be, the program is tier 1. So it's really targeting everyone, targeting the learning, and then it creates a referral pathway to tier 2 and tier 3. So when a challenge occurs, the idea is that through the program, we are able to see it, and then the structures are in place in that community that we make sure the teacher knows how to refer them on. So that's how that gets streamlined, because it's really important that when we're talking about a big challenge and struggle, that every young person has a human being, a person, a practitioner that they can connect to and they can work through these things with. And so that needs to be someone on the ground that they can be with and they can be present with and can help them in their unique situation. So that's the idea, is that we're really working in tandem with those people, and we're making sure that schools are then feeding those referral pathways as soon as there's challenges that arise.
And so, just as a follow-up, and so is that something that Open Parachute can then connect teachers with resources within the district or community?
Yeah. So
that's a resource that you guys can help with?
So we don't usually, schools have those resources already. So that's usually something. So what we do is we connect with the school, and that's part of the sort of onboarding process, is what are the local resources that you use. If they don't know any, it's pretty rare to come across a school that we work with that doesn't have those in place already and know what those are. If those are not in place, we can absolutely help with that. So that's something that we can do. But for the most part, the schools are pretty switched on in terms of that. tier, that really, pointy end of the spectrum. When things are really hard, they usually are pretty dialed in with that crisis intervention. The part that they're not dialed in with is this: how do we just teach every child these skills? So that's usually, but that being said, we basically we support schools in whatever way they need. So if they have questions around any of those things, we absolutely help them with that.
Great, thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. We have a few more questions. I know we're getting close to the end of our hour, but one of the questions asked is, does the program offer specific targeted resources, for example, anti-racism or anti-bullying, or is there a more holistic, comprehensive approach? It's very hard to find workshops for anti-racism from K to 12.
Great question. So the way we do that, so there's certain core topic areas that are covered at every grade, one of them being racism and cultural inequalities. We specifically have Indigenous young people across BC that are represented, and of course, all different ethnicities. As well, bullying is another one of those topics. Gender violence is another one of those topics, boundaries and consent. And the way we do it, because it's story-based, every story has layers woven into it, which is natural. This is what happens, when there's a situation of bullying. Sometimes bullying and racism can go together. Sometimes, an issue of consent can go together with something. And so the way it's broken down is that one story will yield different sections, and that's why the program is built into sections. So they'll be hearing about, Ryan, who's talking about a challenging situation, and then there'll be a whole section in Ryan's topic area that deals with racism, if that's something that he experienced. And so we dive in really deeply to that. Then, then actually there might have been an issue of consent that he experienced, and so we dive into that. So it's holistic in that we are able to target multiple layers, but it is also really targeted in that as soon as a young person brings up a topic area, and that's part of what we, in those interviews and those questioning, that's a question I always ask: is this something you've experienced? Then we specifically dive into it, and there's some really, really powerful stories that we have across BC of young people really diving in and sharing those experiences, and then we really explore them in depth in that story.
Thank you. Wow, I'm trying to catch up with all the questions here. Some of these we've touched on briefly already, but one question is just around, how do we get this program in our schools, which you have addressed, but maybe we just speak to. I know you mentioned that you are potentially signing with the Vancouver VS, the school district. So what that would mean in terms of the schools we have listening in that are in that district. Just maybe expanding on that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, every district is different in terms of what they have funding for, what they're able to participate in. So the best thing probably is to get in touch with us and to let us know what is the district or what is the school that your child is in, and then we can let you know, yes, this is the situation in this district or this district, and then this, we're in some schools but they're seeking funding for next year, or we're not in any schools, so it'd be great to get in touch with the superintendent. So with Vancouver, they're doing sort of a pilot year, which is super exciting, but I know that funding for next year will definitely be a challenge. So that's one specifically for all of those Vancouver schools is a sort of a place to start. But we'd love to hear from you and work together if there's any way that you can support this. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. One comment from one of our parents is, thank you for this amazing presentation. I already understand where I'm falling short. Right at the beginning, it needs to start with the youth voices. Love how you put so much effort into this part. Agree 100% that is key to get the ball rolling. And then just another question just around parent resources. If there are separate parent resources outside of the program that's available for the schools, or if there is like a different curriculum that is accessible for parents outside of that.
Yeah, great question. So the program is the sort of all three elements: the parent, teacher, and student. And so the parent resources are separate. They're accessed separately by parents. It's a whole separate program. We put them all together because we really want to make sure that all elements are targeted. But that being said, the parent resources can absolutely be accessed separately, but ideally they're all kind of going as a unit. So it's separate, but kind of part of the whole model. But we are also always developing developing. So as I said, I'm writing a book for parents, and please stay connected, because we are consistently going to be evolving and creating more and more resources. And the more we know from you directly what it is you're looking for, what would be useful for you, the better resources that we can create. So please feel free to reach out and let us know what you're looking for and what format works for you, and we will build that into our development.
Wow, thank you so very much, Dr. Watson. It's such a pleasure to have you, and thank you for your time and for sharing such a comprehensive presentation of the program. I think I can speak on everyone's behalf, and just some of the comments. It was very, very informative, and we really appreciate it. I look forward to connecting with you offline as well. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you all so much for your attention, and really, you are on the ground doing this work with your kids, so thank you for doing that.
Thank you again.
Absolutely.
We will be in touch. So you're fine with me sharing your contact with the parents that have, okay, wonderful. We'll make sure to send that out to everyone that's participated today.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Good night.